This just in, Ford Dougquaad is making a statement live, and we have that now.
I acknowledge that my actions will result in cyclists dying, but that is a sacrifice that I am willing to make. And because I know for a fact that this will result in injury and death for my constituents, I have made it illegal for you to take my government to court if you're injured or killed by my decisions to remove bike lanes.
With respect, you didn't answer my question about lawsuits and putting through the last-minute amendments, about preventing lawsuits.
My dangerously draconian government overreach isn't designed to help drivers at all, by the way.
Yep. That is what Ford Dougquaad is saying. Also, yes, this Ford Dougquaad and Lord Farquaad from Shrek thing works so freaking perfectly that I've basically made a meme. I hope it takes off, because Ford Dougquaad is such a great character, right? And by great, I mean horrible and very accurate. I'll break this video into 3 chapters for you. So chapter 1 is Draconian Government Overreach. For this part, I don't care which way you lean politically. If you, watching this video right now, are for democracy, then you should absolutely care about what I'm about to say. The passing of Bill 212, Reducing Gridlock, Saving You Time Act 2024, goes against all public feedback, the government's internal documents, traffic studies, and experts, and acknowledges the fact that putting this into law will inevitably cause tax-paying citizens to get hurt or killed.
Says it specifically any individual who is injured or killed because of a collision between a bike and a vehicle. So the Conservatives want to wash their hands from the blood that will be spilled. It will be spilled when these bike lanes are removed. That's what that amendment tells me.
A little bit of education here. The process of passing bills into law is one of the main tasks of a legislative assembly, and it takes up a major portion of the assembly's time. The stages are shown in this diagram on screen right now. At the time that you're seeing this, Bill 212 has royal assent and has become provincial law. Ford Dougquaad and his cronies are moving forward in a destructive, fiscally unconservative, dangerous, and irresponsible direction that more people need to understand a bit more in depth. Again, as the Narwhal puts it, in another story, the Trillium found that one of the major groups pushing against cycling infrastructure is backed by a former progressive conservative candidate, party donors, and big players in the real estate industry. Premier Doug Ford has hinted an early election may be on the way, and opposition parties accused him of using Bill 212 to stoke division and distract from other problems like the crisis in Ontario's healthcare system. And now we know that yes, he is calling an election.
But the timing of this election call is politically advantageous to Ford and his PCs in plenty of ways.
As of like the week that I am recording this, I briefly mentioned this in the intro, but I want to reinforce that the passing of Bill 212 doesn't only negatively affect cyclists, it negatively affects everyone in Ontario, including drivers, but especially screwing drivers in the GTA. See, the majority of what is now an official Ontario Act is actually about going ahead with Highway 413. Which I've already covered extensively in my previous video that you can find here on screen or in the description below. But this time, I'm going to mostly be talking about the bike lane side of the Reducing Gridlock Saving You Time Act. Now for a quick primer on induced demand. Some of you might already know this, that's fine, it's quick. Up until now, many people who are less risk tolerant than the stereotypical spandex-clad middle-aged man in Lycra have been choosing to get out of their vehicles, hop on a bicycle, and not add to traffic congestion. Now though, if the absolute bare minimum of the current semblance of a connected, safe network of bike lanes are torn up for no reason except for catering to suburban voters who are actually the ones causing the traffic in the first place by NIMBYing anything other than car-centric sprawling development, well, we'll have a problem. Those who have been relying on the protection of real, separated, protected bike lanes will most likely hop right back in their cars, which will just make traffic worse. And that's not even considering the months and months of construction that it will take for the removal of all of these bike lanes. And it will cost taxpayers over $48 million. And you know it's going to be way more than that, you know? It'll go over budget, because everything does. Okay, breath. Whew. This government is ignoring everyone. Let me put this in your brain. The current Conservative Ontario government is responsible for flat out ignoring a lot of people. Almost everyone, actually. Even the business interest groups of Toronto, who you might think the Conservative Party would cater to, came out and spoke against Bill 212, even after a truncated one day of committee hearings where I'll remind you that this current Conservative Ontario government gets to choose half the people who speak in committee. And with that in mind, not a single person came to speak in support of the bill. Not one. And then there were over 10 more pages of people who wanted to speak on this. And the government didn't get to hear a single one of them who was going to speak, maybe, in support. Now that's saying something. Not to mention the 19,124 comments that were received throughout the 30-day comment period. That's over 637 comment submissions per day. Like seriously, what I'm about to read is found on the official Government of Ontario website. Here goes. Effects of consultation. A total of 19,124 comments were received. Comments received focused on several themes, including congestion, safety, governance, environment, evidence-based decision-making, fiscal responsibility, transportation infrastructure, health, economic impact, affordability and equity. The comments were considered and the bill was subsequently passed. That's right, they passed the bill without any evidence. Actually, quite the opposite. And of course, they weren't actually able to read and consider all of these 19,000 comments. Clearly, opening the floor to public comment was never about considering what citizens had to say. It was all about appearances. Nice to see democracy in action. More like democracy in action. So, how did this bill pass? And how did that little purely evil amendment that stops anyone from suing the government if removing bike lanes leads to injuries or death sneak past without the public noticing? Just like I mentioned in the previous video, deception. See, the bombshell of this bill is actually this little, very sneaky, but very surprising last-minute 11-page amendment which added more laws so last minute that no one was able to prepare or react. Things like giving the government power to remove bike lanes anywhere, including key streets like Bloor, Yonge, and Avenue Road in Toronto. Preventing cities from building new bike lanes without provincial approval if it affects car lanes. Stopping anyone from suing the government if removing bike lanes leads to injuries or death. I've mentioned that a few times because it's so huge and very important. And a bunch more stuff that's outside of the scope of this video because the last video was clearly a bit too long and I'm running out of time before the Ford Dougquaad Mafia comes after me. Speaking of, if you want to support me, a super thanks or Patreon support is the best way to make sure that I can afford all of the wood needed to board up the windows, kind of like a game of zombies. So, what happened in committee? On the morning of November 21st, 2024, the committee met to discuss Bill 212 at the third reading where the bill was voted on for final approval before royal assent. Here are the relevant highlights from that session. And it's kind of funny. We were watching this and it got spicy, but I thought it was going to be recorded so that I could actually use it later. Unfortunately, it is just streamed and it is not recorded, which is really unfortunate. The only clip that I could find on the interwebs was this one from the news.
Says it specifically any individual who is injured or killed because of a collision between a bike and a vehicle.
That's kind of what it looked like. It's a side committee room, and this is where they were discussing this. So yeah. Unfortunately, I can't have them say it. I would love to because they said all these things so well, but I will say it from their transcript, which is available if you look it up on the website. Early on, Joel Harden raised concerns about the lack of time for public hearings. He pointed out that the bill received more interest than any other one he'd seen in the last 6 years. Yet, many voices were left unheard due to the time limits imposed by the government. Regular citizens and expert organizations like Environmental Defense were among those silenced. Mary Margaret McCone called the bill a matter of life and death and criticized it as extreme municipal overreach. She questioned why taxpayers from other cities would want to pay for the removal of Toronto's bike lanes. Jennifer K. French highlighted how literally no one, not a single person or entity, had spoken in favor of the bill during the hearings. Even though the current Conservative government got to choose half of the people who spoke in committee. She noted that the lack of flexibility in the process and criticized the government for ignoring written submissions in the thousands and expert advice, both internal and external. As much as I could continue talking about why, even with experts and planners and communities and internal government documents telling the government that bike lanes reduce congestion and make roads safer, the real danger, now that the damage is done, is that the precedent has been set for future government overreach. I could continue to talk about how bike lanes save lives, and without them cyclists are forced to ride in car traffic, which reduces the number of people who bike, and it's dangerous, but it will also lead to increased traffic. But you know that already, I've already covered that. So why is this happening? It's not about reducing traffic or saving money. Critics argue that it's about pleasing certain powerful groups, developers, or others with close ties to Ford Dougquaad. This amendment takes away power from cities. Local governments know their communities best, yet the province is stepping in and saying, nah, we'll decide for you. This heavy-handed approach undermines local decision-making and democracy. So who benefits by gaining power? Of course we know, Ford Dougquaad. So what can you do? This isn't just about bike lanes. It's about safety and fairness and how decisions are made in Ontario. It's about democracy and the fact that Ford Dougquaad is edging his way into an authoritarian government regime. It's kind of weird to say, but we don't have a kingdom led by a king like Lord Farquaad in the movie Shrek, who can just ram laws through on a whim. We're supposed to have a democratic government where the people can have a voice. But we're veering in a direction of a kingdom led by Ford Dougquaad, who can just ram laws through on a whim, even when all of his expert advisors are opposed to the things that he's doing, just because he wants to. If you are concerned, here's what you can do in the future. Contact your MPP and share your thoughts about how disappointed you are that Bill 212 passed. Support local groups fighting for safer streets. No matter where you are in the world, make sure that you let your leaders know how important it is to stop putting cars first. There's so many reasons why. Pick yours and send them off. And for the love of not having Ford Dougquaad as our leader in the future, vote! Please vote! There is so much apathy going on in the world right now. People need to be voting. Just like our neighbors to the south, who are also suffering from voter apathy in the tune of over 100 million people not showing up to vote at all in 2024. And don't forget to spread the word of your learnings to friends and family. If you enjoyed this video and want to support future productions, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. If you have the means, I'd love to have you as a supporter over on Patreon, where $5 gets you access to a bunch of things, like early access to new videos on YouTube and exclusive behind-the-scenes content like our extensive brainstorming sessions and behind-the-scenes videos and photos, and you'll be able to message me directly as a patron. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.